Hey guys, my name is Matsumiyo, and today I finally had a chance to play Rising Storm 2. Now, this is a game that I've had on my radar for quite some time now, because as some of you might remember, I really enjoyed Red Orchestra and the original Rising Storm, and so I had high hopes for this one. Thankfully, from what I've played so far during their closed beta weekends, I think the developers might be onto something special here. Now, you do need to know going into this that it is a much more realistic, hardcore, even clunkier first-person shooter than you're probably used to. If you think this is going to be like Battlefield, because it does have 64 players, and that's one great aspect of it, large-scale battles, there's vehicles in here, a lot of infantry running around, but if you assume that you can charge in like a madman and go Rambo, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. You're going to die to one bullet. You're going to die constantly in this game from seemingly out of nowhere. And so if you don't use tactics, and if you're not working with your teammates, you're going to have a hard time. That said though, if you are coordinating with your squad mates and you're working with your commander, it can result in some of the most satisfying and gratifying gameplay that you can experience. Now, one thing I was really curious to see how the developers were going to handle was the asymmetrical gameplay between the different factions. When you play as the United States, you have access to a lot more firepower compared to the Vietnam faction. You have attack helicopters. You can literally fly around in a helicopter and mow people down with their machine guns. If you play down on the ground, you have a wider array of different weapons and classes to choose from. There's literally a grenadier who all he does is run around with a grenade launcher. You can use light machine guns. You have the M16s. Like, there's a lot of weapons and variety here because that was what was available during the Vietnam War. US had the technological advantage. And so I was really curious to see how the developers were going to handle this. You give all the firepower to one faction, how is the other one going to be able to compete? I'm assuming this was what a lot of people were thinking during the original Vietnam War. Everyone assumed that US would be able to go on in and dominate because of these strengths, but of course that's not exactly what happened. And so I think one cool thing that the developers did to balance this is that they mirrored real life. Yes, the United States had all this technology, but the thing that the Vietnam side had was that they knew the terrain and they had overwhelming numbers. To give you an example of this, when you play as the United States, you have a squad leader. You can spawn on your squad leader whenever you want, but the thing is though, is that as soon as he dies, you have to spawn all the way back in your deployments. It takes a long time for you just to run from your deployment all the way back into the action. On the opposite side of the coin though, when you play as Vietnam, your squad leader can essentially place down a spawn beacon. They create a tunnel, and as long as they placed it appropriately, you can just pretty much just constantly reinforce that objective because that spawn is directly behind the front lines. And so it kind of gives you this sense of overwhelming forces because there's a lot more of them. You kill them, but they're right back into the action because even if you kill their squad leader, it doesn't matter. They never really have to spawn back at their deployment. They're always there reinforcing it. And so you might have the guns, you might have a helicopter up in the sky, but they just have the numbers to sit there and take it. And that's a really cool way at trying to balance out those differences. Another tool that Vietnam has at their disposal is a vast network of tunnels. Just like in real life, if you want to, you can take advantage of this tunnel network that allows you to pull off some pretty impressive flanks. I had a moment where I popped out of one of them, shot a guy in the back, retreated because I realized there was more there, popped out from another angle, and shot those guys in the back. It was pretty incredible. Now, the way they balance this out is that if you, as a US soldier, try to go into those tunnels, you can't use your primary weapon. And so if you don't have access to a secondary, which happens a lot, you have no way of retaliating against someone who's actually in the tunnel. I know this doesn't make a whole lot of sense realistically because why can one use their primary while the other one can't? But this was, I'm assuming, a compromise they had to make in the name of balance. Now, one thing I've been really enjoying about the beta is the game mode Supremacy. If you ever played Conquest and Battlefield, it's pretty much just like that, but with a couple of twists. What I like about it is that it leaves a lot more room for flanking in different tactics. If you play more of the standard game mode, which I believe is called Territory, it basically pits 64 people, so 32 versus 32, in a straight line. It's kind of like Rush from Battlefield, where one side is trying to push forward, push past the front lines, and take key objectives. The thing about that game mode, though, is that while it can be very rewarding, it can also be incredibly frustrating. When you're charging into a hail of bullets, and no matter what you do, even when you're trying to flank, even though you're using tactics, you're trying to use smoke, when you're just dying over and over and over again, because that's just what the game is, like I said, you need to know going into it that it's really hard, it's very challenging. it can just get annoying simply because there's just doesn't feel like anything you do is making any progress. And so what I like about the Supremacy game mode is that, well, yeah, it's still super realistic. Everyone's dying with one bullet. It gives you more room to move around. If you want to flank and catch the enemy by surprise, you have more options to do so. If you're playing as a US faction, you can have someone in the helicopter drop you off directly behind the enemy's front line and flank them from that angle. I had a moment where I was able to get on the side of a hilltop. The enemy was coming from the lower end trying to push up onto our objective, and I was able to take each and every single one of them out. It was one of the coolest moments I've had in quite some time. And while of course the enemy can do the exact same thing to you, and it can lead to moments where you just die out of nowhere and you had absolutely no idea where those shots came from, I just found that this game mode was much more manageable, and for someone who's played Battlefield for, a decade now, this was something that really resonated with me. Now, this does get to one of my biggest complaints with Rising Storm 2, though, and that is the lack of maps depending on the game mode that you're playing. If you want to play Supremacy, I think you've only got 2 maps available. If you want to play Territory, there's 5 maps. And then if you want to play, I think it's called Skirmish, there's 3 maps. And so with all of them combined, yeah, that's a fair amount of maps. But if you only want to play one game mode, you don't have a lot of options. If you're someone who loves Supremacy, and that's the only reason why you're playing Rising Storm 2, this is going to be a pretty big disappointment. And so while it's not the worst thing ever, because yeah, you can bounce between the modes, if you do only care about that one mode and you don't care about any of the others, this was a pretty large drawback. Now, I could be wrong about this because I was playing the beta, maybe because it was the beta version, they only had a few maps available, but from the small amount of research that I've done, that doesn't seem to be the case. And so while I really like the game so far, if you only want to play one mode, you only got a couple of maps, and I can only see myself enjoying one map over and over and over again. And so that was one thing that did rub me the wrong way. One thing that I've really appreciated about this game so far, though, and some people might disagree with me on this one, are the colors of the maps. I was not expecting this game to be as bright and vibrant. And while it may not be a AAA polish, it may not look as good as Battlefield 1, because of the colors that they chose, I think some of these maps look gorgeous. They're bright, they're vibrant, they really stand out. And while I know that some people like dreary, drab, brown, and grays, which a lot of the old games were like for the series, I really like the direction that they took with it. I like that style of map, and while it does kind of clash with what's actually happening and going on, I think it was a great direction to take. All in all, though, I've been having a lot of fun with this game so far. I was really kind of worried that they weren't going to be able to translate the Red Orchestra and Rising Storm gameplay into the more automatic territory. Everyone's using automatic weapons. The old games didn't really have that. Everyone was usually using semi-automatic or bolt-action rifles, and I was curious to see if that would translate on over well, and so far, I think they've done a good job. And so if you like those games, you're probably going to feel right at home, or even if you're just someone new to the franchise and you're looking for something that's more realistic and requires teamwork, you might want to keep this one on your radar. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's little look at Rising Storm 2. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys have been thinking of the game so far. Have you tried it out? Have you been enjoying it? Is it not to your liking? Let me know down below in the comments. But yeah, until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.